For the last 3 years, my life has been a spreadsheet. Not the kind where I track my own investments or plan my next big tech project, but a grim, endless ledger of what I've poured into my family. My name is Paula Holland, and I'm 36 years old. I'm a tech consultant, I make good money, and I've always been the responsible one. Turns out that just meant I was the designated ATM. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. My mom, Blair, who's 62 now, called me up claiming she was short on rent. Just a one-off, she swore. Then it was utilities. Then my sister Caitlin, 33, needed help with a credit card bill. My brother Ronald, 29, always jobless and living with mom, needed bail money more times than I care to count. Each time I transferred the money. Each time I got a flimsy thank you, or more often, a lecture about how family sticks together. The emotional beatings were worse than the financial drain. Every conversation was a minefield. If I ever hesitated, Blair would hit me with the classic, "Well, what's the point of family if you won't help?" It was a suffocating blanket of guilt, woven thread by thread over decades. Caitlin would sigh dramatically about how lucky I was to have a stable job, implying I didn't understand their struggles. Ronald would just gaslight me, saying I was overreacting about a few $100, even when it was thousands. I remember a call with Mom just a few weeks ago. I was trying to explain that my own mortgage was due, and I couldn't cover her sudden, emergency car repair. Her voice went cold. "Paula, I raised you. I sacrificed everything, and now you can't even help your own mother?" The line went dead before I could respond. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling like a squeezed-out sponge. But the real breaking point, the moment the last thread snapped, came last Tuesday. My phone buzzed. It was Ronald. "Hey, sis. Listen, Mom's rent is due again and I'm a little short. Can you spot us like $1,000? Just for a few days, promise." $1,000. For rent. Again. I was already feeling the familiar clench in my stomach, the automatic reach for my banking app. But then, later that night, as I was scrolling through Instagram, a picture popped up. It was Ronald, grinning like a Cheshire cat, holding up a brand new, top-of-the-line gaming console. The caption read, "Finally upgraded. Shout out to the fam for the assist." My blood ran cold. The fam. Meaning me. He'd just asked me for rent money, then dropped $1,000 on a video game. My vision blurred for a second, a hot wave of pure, unadulterated fury washing over me. This wasn't about helping family anymore. This was about being a mark. I put my phone down, took a deep breath, and picked it back up. I opened our family group chat, the one usually reserved for passive-aggressive memes from Caitlin or requests for money from Ronald. My fingers flew across the keyboard. To Blair, Caitlin, and Ronald, I typed, my thumbs shaking slightly. For the last 3 years, I have paid your rent, your utilities, your credit card debts, and Ronald's bail. I have put my own financial stability at risk, skipped vacations, and worked myself to exhaustion. I have done this because I thought it was what family did. But I just saw Ronald's Instagram post about his new gaming console, bought with family money, after he just asked me for rent. I am done. I am completely, irrevocably done. Do not ask me for another penny. Do not call me for another emergency. I am no longer your bank. Figure it out yourselves. I hit send. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited. No response. Not a single word. An hour later, I checked the chat. My message was still there, but beneath it, a new notification. Ronald Holland left the group. A few minutes after that, Caitlin Holland Delgado left the group. And finally, Blair Holland left the group. They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just blocked me, silenced me, as if I had never existed, never sacrificed. The next day I saw a post on Blair's Facebook about Thanksgiving plans, tagging Caitlin and Ronald. My name wasn't mentioned, No invite. Nothing. I sat in my quiet apartment, the silence deafening. The anger was still there, a hot ember, but beneath it, a vast, empty ache. They had cut me off. The family I had bled for, literally and figuratively, had decided I was disposable. I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. The reflection of my own face stared back, tired and drawn. I whispered aloud, the words barely audible in the quiet room. They said I was dead to them. So maybe it's time for a resurrection. They said I was dead to them. So maybe it's time for a resurrection. The words hung in the air of my quiet apartment, a strange mix of bitter resolve and a deep, aching void. It had been a week since I'd sent that group chat message, a week since my family had collectively ghosted me. No calls, no texts, just the deafening silence that confirmed their true feelings. I was just a resource, and when the well ran dry, so did their affection. My phone buzzed, pulling me from the quiet despair. It was Madison. Madison Paul, 34, my childhood friend, and now a successful real estate agent. We hadn't talked much lately, life getting in the way, but she was one of the few people who truly knew me, not just the version my family demanded. Paula, hey, long time no talk, but I had to call you about something wild, she chirped, her voice bright and energetic. You know your mom's street? The house right next door to hers? The old Henderson place? It just went on the market. Cash offer, quick close preferred. I know it's a long shot, but I immediately thought of you. Investment property, maybe? Or just proximity? She trailed off, sensing the unspoken tension. Madison knew enough about my family to be subtle. A cold, calculating spark ignited in my chest, pushing back the ache. The Henderson place. I knew it well. A quiet, unassuming house, perfectly situated. Proximity, I echoed, a slow smile spreading across my face. Madison, send me the listing. I want it. Within a day, I'd toured the property. It was exactly as I remembered, a decent, older house, well-maintained, with a small private backyard. I didn't hesitate. I put in a cash offer, well above asking. Through an LLC I quickly set up. No mortgage, no fuss, just a clean, fast transaction. The seller was eager, and Madison, bless her, pushed it through with lightning speed. It was mid-October now, and the closing date was set for early November. While the paperwork for the house was being processed, I made another call. Gary Wood, 38, my longtime friend from college, and now a sharp corporate lawyer. He was the kind of friend who'd listen without judgment, offer practical advice, and then help you execute a plan, no matter how outlandish. Gary, I need your help with something, I started, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I need you to compile every single financial transaction I've ever made to my family. Every rent payment, every utility bill, every debt I cleared, every bail bond. I need it all. Documented, notarized, legally sound. He listened patiently, not interrupting, just a quiet hum of understanding on the other end. Paula, he said finally, that sounds like a lot. Are you okay? I will be, I replied. I just need the receipts, and I need to know if there's anything else. Anything. Untoward. He agreed. His professional curiosity piqued. Send me everything you have. Bank statements, old tax returns, anything that shows an exchange of funds. I spent the next few days sifting through old files, a grim archaeological dig through years of financial sacrifice. Bank statements, credit card bills, even some crumpled, unsigned IOUs Ronald had given me years ago. It was a staggering amount, far more than I had ever consciously tallied. Then I found it. Tucked away in a box of old college papers, a copy of a tax return from when I was 22. I'd been working full-time for a year, making a decent salary, living in my own apartment. My eyes scanned the document, and then they landed on the dependents section. My name, my social security number, claimed as a dependent by Blair. Not just that year, but I found similar instances for 2 other years, all while I was making six figures. A cold dread settled in my stomach, quickly followed by a familiar burning anger. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a deeper betrayal. My own mother, claiming me as a dependent, likely to get a tax break while I was financially supporting her. It triggered a cascade of memories, fragments of a childhood where I was always the responsible one. The one who packed her own lunch, who tutored Ronald in math, who mediated arguments between Blair and Caitlin. "Paula's the strong one," Blair would often say, a dismissive wave of her hand. It wasn't a compliment. It was a label, a justification for piling on more burdens. I was the invisible daughter, the one whose needs were always secondary because I was strong enough to handle it, the one who was expected to give endlessly without question. Now I saw it with chilling clarity. I wasn't strong, I was convenient. I wasn't loved, I was used. A few days later, I sat at a sleek conference table in Madison's office, signing the final documents for the house. The keys felt heavy in my hand, not with the weight of a new home, but with the promise of something else entirely. "Congratulations, Paula," Madison said, beaming. "It closed so fast, even I'm impressed. What are you going to do with it?" I looked at the keys, then out the window, a distant, determined look in my eyes. "Oh, I have plans," I said, a whisper that held the force of a hurricane. "Let's see how loud silence can get. Let's see how loud silence can get." The words resonated in my mind for weeks after I bought the house next door to my family. It was early November now, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. I spent the first few days just walking through the empty rooms, planning. This wasn't going to be a home, it was going to be a stage. My own apartment, a comfortable space I'd worked hard for, felt like a sanctuary. But this new house, just a few yards from the people who had drained me dry, felt like a weapon. I kept the decor to a bare minimum. No cozy touches, no personal flourishes, just clean lines, neutral colors, and a stark, almost clinical feel. The dining room, in particular, was stripped down to essentials: a simple table, 4 chairs, nothing to distract from the main event. In the center of that table, I placed a single plain cardboard box. It was sealed with heavy-duty tape, and across the top, I'd written in bold, black marker, "Truth." Inside were the meticulously organized folders Gary had helped me compile. Speaking of Gary, he'd been a rock. He'd taken my jumbled bank statements, my old tax returns, and the vague accusations, and turned them into an ironclad case. He'd even found proof that Blair had claimed me as a dependent for 4 years, not just 3, while I was earning a substantial income. He'd also uncovered a few instances where Caitlin had opened credit cards in my name, then maxed them out and left me to deal with the fallout. I'd paid those off too, assuming they were family favors. The sheer audacity of it all was breathtaking. The IRS confirmed receipt of the anonymous documentation this morning, Gary had told me over the phone a few days ago. They're reviewing it. Expect some movement in the next few weeks, especially with the tax fraud. That's a big one. A part of me, the part that still yearned for their approval, expected to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. But there was nothing, just a hollow quiet. It wasn't about winning, not yet. It was about the deep ache of being unloved, of realizing the people who were supposed to cherish you had only seen a dollar sign. The revenge was a necessary surgical procedure, but the wound beneath it was still raw. The hardest part was writing the invitation. I wanted it to be simple, direct, and utterly devoid of emotion. I didn't want to give them any room to maneuver, to play the victim, or to claim ignorance. I found a plain white envelope, addressed it to Blair, and slipped a single folded piece of cardstock inside. On it, in my neatest handwriting, it simply read, Dinner. My house. Thanksgiving. Come hungry. No love, Paula. No hope to see you. Just the bare facts. I dropped it in the mail slot of their house myself, late one evening, like a silent, anonymous threat. I knew it would cause a stir. They'd assume it was a peace offering, a sign I'd caved, that I was ready to resume my role as their benefactor. They'd be smug. They'd be curious. And they'd come. Thanksgiving Day arrived, cold and clear. I woke early, a nervous flutter in my stomach that wasn't entirely unpleasant. It was a mix of revenge adrenaline and the deep, familiar ache of a daughter who still, despite everything, wished for a different family. But wishes were for children. I was 36, and I was done wishing. I didn't cook. There was no elaborate turkey, no homemade pies. The kitchen was spotless, unused. The minimalist dining room was set, the table gleaming under the overhead light. The cardboard box, labeled Truth, sat squarely in the center, an ominous centerpiece. Around 4 p.m., I heard the familiar rumble of Blair's old sedan pulling into the driveway of the house next door. My heart gave a sharp, involuntary lurch. I walked to the window, hidden behind the sheer curtains, and watched. First out was Caitlin, 33, her husband Harold, 35, trailing behind her. Caitlin, in a designer coat I knew she couldn't afford on her own, adjusted her hair, a superficial smile plastered on her face. Harold, quiet as ever, looked uncomfortable, his shoulders hunched. He knew. I was almost certain he knew about the manipulation, about the money. He just stayed silent, benefiting from it. Then Ronald, 29, emerged from the passenger side, already reaching for his phone, probably to check social media. He looked bored, entitled, exactly as I expected. Finally, Blair, 62, stepped out, straightening her coat, her expression a careful mask of matriarchal concern. She looked around, her eyes scanning my new house, a flicker of surprise, then calculation, crossing her face. She probably thought I'd bought it as an investment, or maybe even as a new home for them. They walked up the short path to my front door, their faces shifting into practiced, fake smiles. They looked smug, confident they were walking into my surrender. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs. I reached for the front door, my hand steady. Bon appétit, I whispered, and pulled the door open. Bon appétit, I whispered, pulling the door open. Their fake smiles faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of confusion as they took in my expressionless face. There was no warmth, no welcoming embrace, just me, standing in the doorway of a house they didn't recognize, a house they didn't know was mine. "Paula, what a surprise!" Blair chirped, stepping forward, arms outstretched as if to hug me. I didn't move. Her arms dropped awkwardly. "We were so worried when you stopped responding." Her eyes darted past me, taking in the sparse entryway. "Come in," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. I stepped back, allowing them to enter. Caitlin, 33, walked in first, her eyes already scanning the minimalist decor with a visible sneer. Harold, 35, followed, his gaze fixed on the floor. Ronald, 29, sauntered in last, already pulling out his phone. "Wow, Paula, did you just move in?" Caitlin asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's so bare, very therapy house chic." She gestured vaguely at the stark white walls. Ronald snorted. "Yeah, where's all your stuff?" "Did you get robbed?" He chuckled at his own joke, but his eyes were already darting around, probably looking for anything valuable he could comment on or ask for. "It's exactly as I want it," I replied, leading them towards the dining room. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. They were clearly expecting a different reception, perhaps a tearful reunion, a plea for forgiveness. They got none of it. We reached the dining room. The single table, the 4 chairs, and the cardboard box labeled Truth sat like an altar, their eyes immediately fixed on it. "What's this?" Blair asked, her voice losing some of its forced cheerfulness. She walked around the table, peering at the box. "Is this a gift? For us?" "Take a seat," I instructed, gesturing to the chairs. They hesitated, then slowly sat down. Blair at the head, Caitlin and Harold to her right, Ronald to her left. I took the seat opposite Blair, facing them all. The box was equidistant between us. The dinner began awkwardly. There was no food, of course, just the silent tension. Blair, ever the performer, tried to break the ice. "Well, this is different. But it's so good to have us all together. Family is so important, isn't it? Especially around the holidays." She gave a saccharine smile, looking at Caitlin and Ronald, pointedly ignoring me. Caitlin picked at an imaginary piece of lint on her sleeve. "It really is, Mom. We've missed you, Paula." "It's been so quiet without you." Her voice was sickly sweet, a clear attempt to guilt-trip me. Ronald, oblivious, just scrolled on his phone, occasionally grunting. Blair cleared her throat, then raised an imaginary glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice booming slightly in the quiet room. "To forgiveness, to unity, to family. No matter what challenges we face, we always come back together." She looked around the table, her gaze lingering on everyone but me. I remained calm, detached. My internal monologue, however, was a sharp, dry commentary. "Forgiveness? Unity? You mean, to the well-being refilled?" I watched them, their practiced expressions, their subtle cues. Blair's tight smile, Caitlin's feigned concern, Ronald's blissful ignorance. Harold, as always, was a ghost at the table, his silence a complicity. "Thank you, Blair," I said, my voice even. "A lovely sentiment. But before we get to dessert, there's one dish left." Their eyes, which had been wandering, snapped back to me. Blair's brow furrowed slightly. Caitlin's smile tightened. Ronald finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance on his face. I reached out, my hand steady, and placed it on the cardboard box. Their gazes followed my hand. The word truth seemed to glow under the stark light. "It's a special dish," I continued, my voice low, deliberate. "One that's been cooking for a very long time." I looked each of them in the eye, one by one. Blair, Caitlin, Ronald, Harold. Their expressions ranged from mild curiosity to growing unease. They still didn't understand. They still thought they were in control. My fingers found the edge of the tape. With a slow, deliberate motion, I sliced the box open. The sound of the tape tearing was unnaturally loud in the silent room. I reached inside, my hand closing around the first folder. "Truth," I repeated, pulling the folder out. It was thick, neatly labeled. "Let's begin." "Truth," I repeated, pulling the first folder from the box. It was thick, neatly organized, and labeled 2020. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the silence growing heavy with unspoken questions. Their eyes, once curious, were now wide with a dawning apprehension. "Let's begin," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. I opened the folder, revealing a stack of meticulously organized documents. "This first one," I began, holding up a printout, "is a bank transfer from my account to Blair Holland's account, dated January 15th, 2020, for $1,800. Memo, rent. This was the first of many." I laid it on the table, sliding it slightly towards Blair. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me, a flicker of defiance in their depths. "Next," I continued, pulling out another sheet. "A utility bill for your address, Blair, paid in full by me, dated February 2020, $350, and another from March, and April, and so on." I fanned out a dozen or so bills, each one a testament to my financial support. Caitlin, 33, scoffed. "Paula, what is this? Some kind of performance art? We all know you helped out. You're making it sound like we were destitute. Destitute? I raised an eyebrow. While I was splitting my own grocery bill to ensure your lights stayed on, Caitlin, you were posting pictures from a cruise to the Caribbean. Ronald, you were buying a new gaming console. Blair, you were getting your hair done every week. My voice remained calm, almost conversational, which seemed to unnerve them more than anger would have. I pulled out another document. These, I said, holding up a few crumpled pieces of paper, are IOUs. Signed by Ronald Holland, 29, promising to repay funds for court fees and car repairs, totaling over $7,000, none of which were ever repaid. I slid them towards Ronald. He flinched, his face paling slightly. Then we have these, I continued, pulling out a stack of credit card statements. These are statements for a card under my name, but the transactions are clearly yours, Caitlin. Designer clothes, spa days, expensive dinners, totaling over $12,000. All paid by me, Caitlin gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's not fair. You said you'd help me out. I was going through a hard time. A hard time that involved luxury purchases? I countered, my voice still eerily composed. And I did help you out, Caitlin. I paid them, every single one. Without a single thank you, I might add. Blair, 62, finally found her voice. Paula, this is melodramatic. We're family. We help each other. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You have a good job. You can afford it. Can afford it? I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Let's talk about what I couldn't afford, Blair, like my own financial independence, or perhaps the truth about my own taxes. I reached into the box and pulled out a new folder, thinner than the others, but far more potent. This is a notarized affidavit from my lawyer, Gary Wood, 38. And these, I held up several official-looking documents, are copies of my tax returns from 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. Their faces were a mixture of confusion and growing dread. In each of these years, I stated, my voice dropping slightly, despite me being 22, 23, 24, and 25 years old, living in my own apartment, and earning a six-figure salary as a tech consultant, someone fraudulently claimed me as a dependent on their tax returns. I looked directly at Blair. Someone who benefited from a tax break by lying to the IRS. Blair's face went from pale to mottled red. That's a lie. I would never. You're making this up, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You're trying to ruin me. Melodramatic, Caitlin echoed, but her voice was shaky. Paula, this is insane. You're lying. Ronald, for once, was silent, his phone forgotten in his lap. His eyes darted between me and the documents. I'm not lying, I said, my voice still calm, almost a whisper. And I don't need to, because the IRS already has copies of all of these documents, and they're already investigating. The air left the room. Blair slumped back in her chair, her face a mask of shock and fury. Caitlin looked like she was about to be sick. Ronald's jaw dropped. Harold, 35, who had been silent this entire time, finally reacted. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with a look of pure terror. He knew. I had suspected it, but now I was certain. He had known about the manipulation, about the tax fraud, and he had said nothing, benefiting from the money I'd poured into their lives. Blair, recovering slightly, hissed. After everything we've done for you, Paula, after everything. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with hers. Exactly, I whispered. Exactly. Exactly, I repeated, the word hanging in the air like a final judgment. Blair's face was a mask of fury, but beneath it, I saw a flicker of fear. Caitlin looked like she was about to burst into tears, and Ronald was frozen, his mouth slightly agape. Harold, ashen-faced, still hadn't uttered a sound. I picked up another folder, this one labeled Vacations and Rent. Let's walk through this year by year, I said, my voice steady, almost conversational. In 2020, while I was meticulously splitting my grocery budget to make sure your rent was paid on time, Blair, you took a 2-week cruise to Alaska. Caitlin, you went to Cancun. Ronald, you were at that music festival in Nevada. I laid out bank statements and credit card bills, showing my transfers juxtaposed with their vacation expenses. I worked overtime, took on extra freelance projects, and ate ramen for dinner so you could enjoy yourselves, all while telling myself it was family helping family. Blair slammed her hand on the table. You're twisting things. We invited you. You chose not to come. Did you? I asked, a dry chuckle escaping my lips. Or did you guilt-trip me into staying home? Like the time in 2021, Blair, you called me crying saying Ronald 29 was in serious trouble with the law again and needed me to handle things? You knew I had a major promotion meeting that day, a meeting that could have changed my entire career trajectory. You said, family comes first, Paula. Ronald needs you. So I skipped it. I spent that day in a stale courthouse, sorting out Ronald's latest mess, while you and Caitlin went to that expensive spa day you posted about on Facebook. Ronald finally stirred, his eyes wide. That wasn't serious. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that cost me a promotion and thousands in legal fees. I corrected him, my voice rising slightly, the first crack in my calm facade. A misunderstanding that you never once apologized for, Ronald. Because you knew I would fix it. Just like you knew I would pay for your weed, your sneakers, your gaming consoles, and bail you out every time you got into trouble. The anger, cold and precise until now, began to burn hotter. It wasn't a scream, not a wild outburst. It was a slow, deliberate affirmation of a truth I had suppressed for decades. You didn't love me, I stated, my voice clear and resonant in the silent room. You used me. You saw me as an endless resource, a bottomless pit of money and emotional labor. You took all that I had, my time, my money, my peace of mind, and you gave me nothing in return but guilt and manipulation. My voice was thick with emotion, but my eyes remained dry, fixed on them. You didn't care about me. You only cared about what I could do for you. Caitlin, 33, who had been picking at her nails, suddenly burst into tears. This is so unfair. You're making me sound like a monster. I didn't know you were struggling. You didn't know, I scoffed. I told you, Caitlin. I told you I was stretching myself thin. But you just smiled and said, "Oh, Paula, you're so good at handling things." And then you'd ask for another loan for a new handbag. And those credit cards, Caitlin, the ones under my name that you maxed out, the IRS may very well consider that fraud too. They'll be looking at everyone who benefited from my money, especially if it was used to avoid paying taxes or hide income. Her sobs intensified. The IRS? No, Mom, Harold, do something. She turned to Harold, 35, who remained frozen, his face a mask of terror. Ronald, 29, suddenly lunged forward, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't do this. You can't just air all our dirty laundry. This is family business. He reached for the table, his hands balled into fists, clearly intending to flip it. My eyes narrowed. Don't even think about it, Ronald. As his hands touched the edge of the table, I calmly reached into my pocket. My fingers found the small, almost invisible button on the side of my phone. I pressed it. A tiny red light, imperceptible to them, flickered on. I had been recording the entire night. Every word, every accusation, every denial, every truth. Ronald's hands were on the table, poised to flip it. My finger was on the recording button of my phone, the tiny red light glowing imperceptibly. The air crackled with a volatile energy. Don't even think about it, Ronald, I repeated, my voice low and steady. He froze, his eyes wide, caught between rage and the unfamiliar sight of me standing my ground. Then, the dam broke. It wasn't me who broke it, though. It was them. The carefully constructed facade of family unity shattered into a million pieces. "This is all your fault, Mom!" Caitlin, 33, shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "You told me it was fine. You said Paula would never tell anyone. Now the IRS is going to audit me because of those stupid credit cards." She rounded on Harold, 35, who was still slumped in his chair, pale and silent. "And you knew. You knew she was doing this, and you didn't say anything." "You just let me take the fall." Harold finally stirred, his voice a barely audible whisper. "I told you to be careful, Caitlin. I told you she was getting tired of it." "Tired of it?" Caitlin screamed, leaping to her feet. "You let me run up thousands of dollars in debt on her card, and now you're saying I should have been careful. You're supposed to be my husband. You're supposed to protect me." Blair, 62, her face contorted with rage, rose from her chair, pointing a trembling finger at me. You little psychopath! How could you do this to your own family? After everything I've done for you? I sacrificed my life for you ungrateful children." "Sacrificed?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You sacrificed nothing, Blair. You manipulated, you guilt-tripped, you lied. You stole from me, literally, by claiming me as a dependent while I was supporting you. You taught your children to be entitled parasites, and I was the host." Ronald, 29, seeing his mother and sister turn on each other, finally found his voice, a whine laced with anger. "This is all unfair. I didn't ask for all that money. You just gave it to me. You always said you were rich." "I gave it to you because you begged, Ronald," I shot back, my voice sharp. "Because Blair would call me, crying, saying you were in trouble again, because you're a grown man who refuses to get a job and expects everyone else to fund his lifestyle. You're just jealous," Blair shrieked, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "Jealous that Caitlin is beautiful and has a husband. Jealous that Ronald is fun and popular. You've always been the cold, calculating one, the one who never fit in." She stormed towards the door, her face a mask of pure venom. "I'm leaving. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this psychopath try to destroy her own family." Caitlin, still sobbing, turned her fury on Ronald. "This is your fault, Ronald. If you just got a job, we wouldn't be in this mess. You're always the one causing trouble." Ronald, in turn, rounded on Caitlin. "Me, what about your shopping addiction? You're the one who can't hold down a job and spends all of Paula's money on fancy clothes." Harold, seeing the chaos erupt, quietly stood up and edged towards the door, trying to make himself invisible. "Oh no, Harold," I said, my voice cutting through the cacophony. He froze, his hand on the doorknob. "You're not getting off that easy. You knew about the tax fraud, didn't you? You knew about Caitlin's spending habits. You stood by and watched me get drained, and you benefited from it." "You're just as complicit." Harold's face went even whiter. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Blair, already at the front door, turned back, her eyes blazing. "You are dead to me, Paula. Do you hear me? Dead!" I met her gaze, my expression unwavering. The recording light on my phone continued to glow. "I'm dead to you?" I said, my voice calm, almost a sigh. "Good. Consider this my will. Everything you thought you were entitled to, everything you took from me, it's gone. Forever." They left. Blair slammed the front door behind her, the sound echoing through the stark, empty house. Caitlin, still sobbing, stumbled out after her, dragging a silent Harold. Ronald, after one last furious glare, followed them, muttering curses under his breath. The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. The house, which had been filled with their toxic energy, now felt eerily peaceful. I walked slowly through the dining room, past the open box of truth, past the empty chairs. The air felt lighter, cleaner. The weight I had carried for so long, The burden of their expectations and manipulations had finally lifted. I walked into the living room, a sense of quiet triumph settling over me. The revenge wasn't petty. It was surgical. It wasn't about hurting them, not really. It was about severing the ties, about reclaiming my own life. I walked to a small, locked drawer in the built-in cabinet. I pulled out a key from my pocket, inserted it, and turned. Inside, nestled among a few old letters, was a faded photograph. It was a picture of a younger me, maybe 10 years old, laughing, held in the arms of a smiling woman with kind eyes. Aunt Ruby, 54. Blair's sister, my only family ally growing up, who had moved out of state years ago after a falling out with Blair. I picked up the photo, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips. I pulled out my phone, the recording still running, and scrolled through my contacts. I found her number. "Hey, Aunt Ruby," I said, my voice soft, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's me." "Hey, Aunt Ruby. It's me." The words felt foreign, yet right on my tongue. It had been years since I'd spoken to Blair's sister, Aunt Ruby, 54, who had moved out of state after her own bitter falling out with my mother. She was the only one who had ever truly seen me, the only one who had tried to warn me about Blair's manipulative tendencies. Her voice, when she answered, was cautious, then softened with recognition. "Paula. Oh, honey, it's been so long. Are you all right?" "I am now," I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. I needed to talk. About everything." A few days later, I was sitting in Aunt Ruby's cozy living room, a mug of herbal tea warming my hands. I recounted the entire story, from the first loan to the Thanksgiving ambush. She listened, nodding occasionally, her eyes filled with a familiar sadness. "I knew it," she said quietly when I finished. "Blair never changed. She did the same thing to me, you know. Years ago, she convinced me to co-sign a loan for her business venture that never materialized. She defaulted, and it ruined my credit. When I confronted her, she called me ungrateful, said I was trying to ruin the family. That's why I left. I just couldn't take it anymore." Her story echoed mine, a chilling validation of the pattern I had finally broken. It wasn't just me, it was Blair's modus operandi. The weeks that followed Thanksgiving were quiet. No calls, no texts, no angry voicemails from Blair, Caitlin, or Ronald. The silence was no longer deafening. It was liberating. I spent my days working, focusing on my own life, and occasionally checking in with Gary. "The IRS is moving quickly on the tax fraud," Gary, 38, confirmed over the phone one afternoon in early December. "Claiming a dependent who earns a six-figure income is a pretty clear-cut case. And the credit card situation with Caitlin is a separate but related issue. They're looking into all of it." A few days later, a crisp, official-looking envelope arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't for me. It was a summons addressed to Blair Holland from the Internal Revenue Service. I felt a pang, not of triumph, but of finality. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about consequences. I started spending more time at my own apartment, the house next door serving its purpose. It was a symbol, a statement, but my true home was where I felt safe and free. I reconnected with old friends, started taking weekend trips I'd always put off, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing freely. The vengeance wasn't cruel. It was clarity. It was the painful, necessary act of cutting out a cancerous growth. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. I grieved the family I thought I had, the love I believed was unconditional. But that grief was tempered by the profound relief of knowing the truth. I wasn't dead to them. I was just paying to stay alive in their fiction. Now I got to live for real. For myself. One afternoon, a few weeks after the IRS summons arrived, I checked my mailbox. Tucked among the junk mail was a plain white envelope. No return address, no stamp. Just my name, handwritten in a familiar shaky script. I knew immediately who it was from. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. "We need to talk," it read, unsigned. I stared at the words for a long moment. No apology. No acknowledgement of their actions, just the same old demand, the same old expectation that I would fix things. I folded the letter neatly. I walked over to the kitchen trash can, lifted the lid, and dropped it in without a second look. Then, I shut the door, not just to the trash can, but to that chapter of my life.